Grandpa stood in the middle of the dirt lot, arms crossed, right between the shiny survey van and the weathered old barn he'd built with his own hands. A cigarette hung from the corner of his mouth, barely burning. Two men in neon vests had just finished pushing a handful of bright orange stakes into our field like they owned it. One of them held a clipboard, like it made him powerful. The other kept looking back at the van, probably wondering if they should leave. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just tilted his head, flicked ash off his boot, and said clear as day, "You've got 30 seconds to pull those stakes, or I'm feeding them to the goats." They thought he was joking, until he stepped toward the barn and grabbed the post driver. That's when things started getting real. But to understand why that moment mattered, you gotta hear what happened the week before. Let me tell you how we got here. It was early morning on the ranch, the kind of quiet that only happens before the sun fully wakes up. You could hear birds chirping in the trees, the wind brushing through the tall grass, and Grandpa's old radio crackling out some country song from the barn window. We were out by the fence line, working on a loose post that kept leaning with the wind. Grandpa held the wire steady while I hammered it back in place. Nothing fancy, just one of those normal days where the chores come slow but steady. That's when we saw it, a white truck rolling up the ridge road, real slow, like it didn't want to be noticed. But we noticed. It didn't look like any of ours. No ranch dust on the tires, no dents on the side, not even a speck of mud. It was shiny. Too shiny. Like it had never seen a gravel road in its life. Grandpa stopped mid-swing and watched it come closer. He didn't say a word, but I saw his jaw tighten just a little. That truck didn't belong out here, and we both knew it. The truck came to a stop just past our cattle gate, the one with the big private property, no trespassing sign nailed right to the post. The engine cut off, and two men stepped out like they had every right to be there. Both wore bright orange safety vests, and one of them had a clipboard tucked under his arm like it was a badge. The side of their truck had a cheap magnetic sign stuck on the door. It read, "County Infrastructure Survey," in block letters. No seal, no department name, just something that looked like it had been printed at an office supply store. They didn't wave. Didn't look around for the landowner. They just got straight to it. One started walking along the fence line, pulling orange flags from a pouch on his belt and sticking them into the ground every 10 feet or so. The other guy followed behind him with a bundle of thin stakes, jabbing them into the dirt like they were drawing a line on a map that didn't belong to them. Grandpa and I stood there watching, not saying a word at first. We wanted to see how far they'd go before they realized they weren't welcome. But they didn't even glance in our direction. No knock on the door, no question, no permission. Just acting like our land was some empty lot they could walk all over. Grandpa didn't rush. He just finished his drag off the cigarette, tapped the ash to the ground, and started walking toward them with slow, steady steps. His boots crunched across the gravel like they weighed a little more than usual. I stayed back near the fence, but I didn't take my eyes off him. There's a way Grandpa walks when he knows something's off. Shoulders low, hands loose, but eyes locked in like he's already 3 steps ahead of you. He stopped a few feet from the men and looked them over. Not angry, just reading them. Then he said, real calm, "Can I help you boys with something?" His voice had that rough edge, the kind that made you think twice before answering wrong. The clipboard guy straightened up like he was about to give a speech. "We're with County Infrastructure Survey," he said, "mapping future utility corridors for public access planning." He said it like we were supposed to be impressed. Grandpa didn't blink. He turned and pointed at the fence post behind him. "That line right there's been on record longer than your truck's been registered. You boys got a permit to cross it?" The other man, the one laying flags, didn't say anything. Clipboard guy cleared his throat and said something about public access easement review, like repeating it made it real. Grandpa just nodded once, real slow. Well, unless you've got the paperwork in your hand, you're on the wrong side of the gate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Grandpa didn't argue. He just turned around and walked back toward the barn like he was going to grab another tool. No rush, no words. Just a quiet kind of purpose. A minute later, he came back with the old post driver balanced on his shoulder and a coil of rope in his other hand. Without saying a thing, he walked right up to the nearest orange flag, pulled it clean out of the ground, and tossed it aside. Then another, and another. The two men froze for a second, not sure what to do. Then Clipboard Guy found his voice. "Sir, you can't do that. You're interfering with county business," he shouted, trying to sound official. Grandpa didn't even glance at him. He kept yanking flags until his path brought him to the front of their truck. That's when he stopped, looked them dead in the eye, and said, "You come with a permit, or you leave with a story." They didn't move. So Grandpa reached down, wrapped the bumper chain under their front axle, and walked it back to the barn tractor like he'd done it 100 times. When the engine roared to life and the chain went taut, the truck gave a little jerk. That's when they realized he wasn't bluffing. I pulled out my phone and hit record. If they wanted to make this official, we were going to have proof. Grandpa didn't yell. He just put the tractor in gear and slowly started dragging their shiny white truck right back to the edge of our land. The deputy rolled in about 15 minutes after the truck stopped moving. Same guy who's been out to the ranch before, Deputy Keller. He didn't even flip on his lights, just eased up the drive with the window down and a look on his face like he already knew what kind of mess he was walking into. When he stepped out and saw the white truck halfway dragged back to the road, bumper chain still hanging loose, he let out a long sigh. "Let me guess," he said, eyes on the broken stake in the dirt. "Didn't read the sign." Grandpa gave him a nod but didn't say anything. The two men tried to explain themselves, stumbling over words like emergency review protocol and temporary access. One of them even pulled out a plastic badge that looked like it came out of a cereal box. Keller took one glance at it and handed it back without touching it. "You got a permit on file?" he asked. They didn't. "Zoning approval?" Nothing. "Anything at all that says you're supposed to be here?" Still nothing. Keller radioed the county office. Nobody had ever heard of their project. Then they tried calling their supervisor. He didn't answer either. After things settled down a bit, Grandpa walked over to the back of their truck and popped it open like he was checking a feed delivery. Inside was a pile of rolled-up maps, folders, and one of those plastic bins full of clipboards and printed papers. He pulled out the top map, unrolled it across the truck bed, and gave a low whistle. Right there, in red marker, was our ranch, circled twice. Next to it, someone had scribbled low resistance area in the margins. Another line ran from our creek all the way to a patch of green labeled Phase 1 Utility Access. Grandpa didn't say much, just took a photo with his flip phone and handed the map over to Deputy Keller, who raised his eyebrows and let out a slow, "Well, that ain't good." They both stood there for a minute, quiet. Then Keller made a call to the county zoning office. A woman picked up and started typing while he read her the name off one of the documents. East River Holdings. After a few minutes, she came back on the line and said that company had submitted several early project requests, all tied to future development permits. But none of them had been approved. Not one. And definitely not for our land. Grandpa didn't wait around. That same afternoon, he went straight into the house, pulled out the big file box from under the hallway bench, and laid it open on the kitchen table. Inside were all the old papers, yellowed, handwritten, some stamped with dates going back farther than I could remember. He flipped through them like he knew exactly what he was looking for. And there it was. The original deed, and water rights agreement, signed and sealed before the county even had its first zoning office. Then he picked up the phone, called the sheriff, and after that, the state water board. His voice stayed low, steady. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He had proof. That night, we went out and set up 2 trail cameras along the back fence near the creek bend, where the ground stayed soft and the survey stakes had started showing up again. Sure enough, just before sunrise, the motion sensor caught movement. When we checked the footage the next morning, there they were, 2 of the same guys from before, walking along the fence line with measuring tape and fresh stakes, acting like they still had a right to be there. The camera had it all: faces, gear, timestamps. Grandpa smiled for the first time in days. Not a happy smile. The kind that meant someone was about to have a very long week. A couple days later, a shiny black SUV rolled up just past the gate, tires crunching like it didn't belong on gravel. Out stepped a man in a pressed shirt and fancy sunglasses, carrying a folder like it was supposed to impress somebody. He smiled wide like this was just a neighborly visit, said he was from East River Holdings, and started talking about partnership opportunities and mutual benefits. Grandpa didn't even flinch. He walked up to the pasture gate, leaned on it with one hand, and looked the man dead in the eye. "That creek's been here longer than your spreadsheets," he said, voice flat as a fence post. The developer chuckled like he didn't hear the warning in that tone, and kept talking. Said they were willing to pay good money for a 20-foot easement through the creek bend. Promised it would be clean, fast, and nobody would even notice. Grandpa didn't laugh, didn't blink, just said, "I'd notice. Every time one of your trucks parked where my grandkids fish." The man went quiet for a second, then offered to leave his card. Grandpa didn't take it, just turned around and walked back toward the barn. That conversation was over. A week later, word came down from the county office. Every single claim East River Holdings had filed was thrown out. No permits, no right-of-way, no public access approval. Nothing. They didn't just lose the project, they got hit with a fine for trespassing and illegal surveying. The developers stopped returning calls, and their fancy SUV never showed up again. The stakes they had planted across the pasture got pulled out one by one, and nobody argued this time. Grandpa didn't say much about it. He just took out a wooden board from the barn, painted it by hand, and screwed it right onto the front gate with an old rusted drill. The sign read, "This land is spoken for." That was it. No threats, no warnings, just a quiet message that couldn't be misunderstood. Down by the creek, the white survey truck still sat half buried in the mud, paint peeling, windows fogged. We never bothered pulling it out. It didn't feel right to move it. Some things are better left where they end. And as I stood there beside Grandpa, watching the water slide past the bend, I remember thinking, out here, memory runs deeper than pipelines. Grandpa never raised his voice, but when he said something, it stuck. Like when one of the fake surveyors slipped in the mud and landed flat on his back, Grandpa just muttered, "Should have packed better boots." No laughter, no smile, just that dry tone that somehow made it funnier than any joke. And when the developer tried calling the creek a minor water feature, Grandpa replied, "That minor feature kept 3 generations fed, son." It wasn't loud, but it hit hard. The visuals made everything feel even more real. That white truck, once spotless, now sat with mud splashed halfway up the doors, the hood bent from the tow chain's tug. When it landed in the creek, water flew like it was celebrating. Later, when we finished rebuilding the fence, you could hear the wires hum in the wind. Tight, strong, clean. New metal posts lined the edge of the field, standing straight like guards on watch. Motion lights blinked every time something moved, and the cameras clicked like quiet reminders. were watching now. The risk wasn't just about a fence or a field. It was about the water. That creek wasn't just pretty to look at. It was part of our rights, part of our family's way of life. If they'd snuck a pipe through, they could have drained it dry without asking. That's what really lit the fire under Grandpa. And the payoff didn't come all at once. It came in little pieces, a deputy nodding without needing words, a zoning officer admitting they'd messed up, the sight of surveyors pulling out stakes with their heads low. But the final scene, Grandpa sitting by the creek with his boots up, dogs by his side, and that new sign hanging on the gate, tied it all up. The land was quiet again, but different now. Not just protected, remembered. Because out here, land doesn't forget who walked it, who worked it, and who tried to take it without asking.